While millions are glued to their TVs, faces painted, hearts shattered over 11 strangers losing a game, there's a massive group of people who just don't care. And neuroscience suggests their brains may actually be wired differently. Stick with me here, because what I'm about to share could completely shift how you see the sports fanatics in your life. Here's what nobody talks about. Not caring about sports doesn't make you boring. It doesn't mean you lack passion. And it certainly doesn't mean something's wrong with you. But there is something fascinating happening in your brain, something different from the roughly 60% of Americans who follow sports like a religion. So let's start with the obvious. Why do so many people care this much? Humans are tribal by nature. For thousands of years, belonging to a group meant survival. Your tribe protected you, helped you hunt, kept you alive. Sports are just modern tribes with better merchandise. When fans watch their team, their brains flood with oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the same chemical that ties families together. Their brains literally trick them into feeling like these athletes are part of their clan. But here's where it gets interesting. People who don't obsess over sports often show what psychologists call lower tribal identification. Their identity isn't tightly bound to group belonging. They tend to be more individualistic, more comfortable standing alone, not needing something bigger to feel whole. And research backs this up. A 2019 study found that people with low sports interest showed significantly less us versus them thinking. Translation, they're less likely to hate another group simply because it's wearing different colors. Now it gets even more intriguing. Inside a sports fan's brain during a game, it looks a lot like the rush you feel before unwrapping a gift. That surge is dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. Fans experience wave after wave of anticipation and payoff with every single play. Brain imaging reveals that watching a favorite team lights up the same reward circuits involved in gambling and other highly addictive behaviors. The unpredictability, never knowing if your team will pull through, keeps that dopamine loop spinning. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful reward patterns we know. People who don't care about sports, they simply don't get the same dopamine hit from watching someone else compete. Some research even hints that genetic variations in dopamine receptors might determine how strongly you respond to spectator sports. In other words, your indifference might actually be hardwired. There's another layer to this: burgeoning, basking in reflected glory. When a team wins, fans say, "We won." When it loses, "They lost." Notice that shift. It's psychological self-protection. People less invested in sports tend to anchor their self-worth internally. Their sense of success doesn't hinge on external victories, making their self-esteem more stable, less vulnerable to things they can't control. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, this isn't about one way being superior. It's about recognizing legitimate psychological differences. Interestingly, sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures because they practice caring intensely about strangers. Non-sports fans may channel that empathy elsewhere, toward social causes, creativity, relationships, or intellectual pursuits. A 2021 study found that people with low sports interest often scored higher in openness to experience and appreciation for art and beauty. They chase emotional meaning through music, ideas, creativity, nature. Their brains are pursuing the same human needs: connection, reward, transcendence, just down different roads. For some, indifference to sports has personal roots. Maybe they felt excluded, had negative experiences growing up, never clicked with competition, or sometimes they just find it boring. At its core, the divide between fans and non-fans comes down to how people experience meaning. Fans find it in narrative, underdog stories, impossible comebacks, dynasties, rivalries. Non-fans may see that randomness as emotionally inefficient.
Why invest deeply in something you can't influence? Neither perspective is wrong, just different paths to engagement and significance. Psychologists describe this as parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Fans build emotional bonds with teams they'll never meet. Non-fans prefer investing energy where their participation changes the outcome. Both are valid ways to navigate life. Research on flow states shows deep absorption can come from countless activities. For some, it's sports. For others, it's creating, learning, building, exploring. Interestingly, people who don't obsess over sports often report deeper immersion in their own pursuits. They're not living vicariously, they're engaged in their own challenges and growth. So what does all this mean? If you don't care about sports, you're not missing some fundamental human experience. Your brain's reward system, tribal instincts, and emotional priorities are simply calibrated differently, and that's perfectly normal. Next time someone asks, "Did you see the game?" and you genuinely didn't care, remember this: you're not broken. You're not boring. You're just playing a different game, one that actually matters to you. And that difference might be one of your greatest strengths.